Welcome to today's Friday Transportation Seminar. My name is Jason Anderson, and I will be introducing and moderating today's seminar. Our Friday Transportation Seminars have been a tradition since the year 2000. These seminars are once again being held live on Portland State University's urban campus, located on the ancestral homelands of the Multnomah, the Calumet, Clackamas, Tumwater, and Watlala bands of the Chinook, the Tualatin, Kalapuya, and many other indigenous nations of the Columbia River. It is important to acknowledge that we are here because of the sacrifices forced on the indigenous ancestors of this place, remember these communities, and honor their legacy, lives, and descendants. Today, we are pleased to have Celeste Gilman of the Washington Department of Transportation presenting on bringing complete streets to reality in state transportation projects. Celeste Gilman is the Strategic Policy Administrator based on Washington Department of Transportation's Active Transportation Division and has led the implementation of complete streets for state transportation projects since the passage of the new requirement in the Move Ahead Washington package. Celeste has held a number of roles at the Washington Department of Transportation, including Transportation and Land Use Policy Advisor and Deputy Director of the Regional Transit Coordination Division. Prior to joining the Washington Department of Transportation, Celeste led the University of Washington's award-winning sustainable transportation programs, helping Huskies choose to use non-drive-alone modes for 80% of their trips to campus. Celeste has over 20 years of experience in sustainable transportation and has shared her expertise locally, nationally, and internationally. Here's a preview of some of the speakers for the fall series. An overview of today's seminar. You can expect our speakers to present for about 40 minutes, followed by a Q&A. We will be receiving questions through the Q&A feature on your control panel, and we'll ask them at the end of the presentation. If we run out of time for all your questions, we will give our speakers the opportunity to email written responses for any questions left unanswered. We have enabled closed captioning, but you must click on the CC feature on your control panel to view them. We will be recording today's webinar. It will be available on our website later today, along with the presentation slides. If you are tracking professional development hours, this webinar is eligible for 1 hour of continuing education credit. With that, I will hand it over to Celeste.
Thank you. And I'm grateful to be with you virtually, even though transportation issues conspired for me to not be joining you in person today. I'm excited to talk with you about the unfolding implementation of our new requirement for complete streets for state transportation projects. I'd like to start with this quote from Anthony Aitung. Every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. In addition to sharing what we are doing, I want to paint the picture of the many elements that are coming together to create a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. Across Washington, our goals tell us that we want different outcomes from our transportation system. We want to eliminate health disparities, take action to address the climate crisis, and achieve zero fatal and serious injuries from traffic violence. Many complementary pieces are connecting to change our actions as we work towards achieving different results. The first element is the changing transportation industry. Shortly after Roger Millar became our Secretary of Transportation, a member of the public sent him a message stating that our agency was a failure because the person could not consistently drive at the posted speed limit on our highways. So Secretary Millar asked his team to analyze how much additional highway space would be needed so that everyone could always drive the speed limit. The results, 451 lane miles at a staggering cost of $115 billion. This would require a gas tax increase of an additional $2.20 to $2.25 per gallon, many times higher than all historic increases. We can't build our way out of congestion. Trying to do so is financially, environmentally, and socially untenable. The analysis of what that might look like in Washington does not even account for the well-established phenomena of induced travel. For a great explanation of this subject, I recommend Jamie Volker's February 4th, 2022 Trek presentation on induced travel. Trying to solve congestion by making more space for cars is a problem of geometry. It takes significantly more space to move the same amount of people by car than by any other form of typical land-based transportation. When more space is devoted to vehicle transportation, every place that people might want to reach gets pushed farther apart. And the farther apart destinations are, the more space is consumed by vehicle transportation, the more that people are compelled to drive as the only viable option. Complete Streets is about providing a balanced transportation system. And a balanced transportation system has many benefits. When people have meaningful options for getting around and people aren't forced to drive or be isolated, then we have more space for the things that matter in communities, less greenhouse gas emissions and other pollutants, and safer and more connected communities. It takes quality infrastructure that invites people to walk, bicycle, and take transit to achieve these benefits. Without quality infrastructure, the people who walk and bicycle are only the very brave and those without other choices. Unfortunately, our safety trends are going in the wrong direction. And the reality on the ground is we have too many places that feel like this. We can get different results if we change our approaches. Decades of work by community members, researchers, practitioners across the country and the world are showing the way. At the national level, the Federal Highway Administration is focusing on complete streets with a recent report to Congress and multiple new technical resources and funding opportunities. In Washington, jurisdictions across the state have been adopting and implementing complete streets policies since the phrase was coined by David Goldberg in 2003, as illustrated by this map of adopted policies. Into that context, the next element is leadership. The Washington State Department of Transportation, we have outstanding leaders who are active contributors to that changing transportation industry. Our Secretary of Transportation, Roger Millar, has had a varied and distinguished career, including Vice President of Smart Growth America and the Division Manager of the Portland Office of Transportation. Our Deputy Secretary, Amy Scarton, has held numerous roles within WSDOT and is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary for the WSDOT and Majority Counsel for the Highways and Transit for the U.S. House of Representatives Transportation Committee. That's just the start of a long list of excellent leaders who have established our vision at WSDOT that Washington travelers have a safe, sustainable, and integrated multimodal transportation system. And our goals focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, workforce development, and resilience. And those leaders keep our strategic plan, our goals, our values at the forefront of what we do as an agency. Leadership matters. One example of that leadership is our statewide active transportation plan, led by our director of our active transportation division, Barb Chamberlain, who in her varied career has also been, was the former executive director of Washington Bikes and an Idaho state senator. In our new plan, our active transportation plan adopted last year, it provides a compass for creating the future of walking, bicycling, and rolling on and across state highways in Washington. And it establishes a number of performance metrics, most notably adoption of level of traffic stress and route directness index, and a focus looking across our state at population centers which encompass both incorporated cities and census designated places, recognizing that many places have the land use characteristics that lends itself to short trips by walking and bicycling, even if they're not an incorporated city. The next element is the Washington State Legislature, who passed the Move Ahead Washington package in spring of 2022 with historic investments in active transportation and transit, advancing implementation of our state active transportation plan. Move Ahead Washington included a new requirement for complete streets in state transportation projects, directed that in order to improve the safety, mobility, and accessibility of state highways, it is the intent of the legislature that the department must incorporate the principles of complete streets and facilities that provide street access with all users in mind, including pedestrians, bicyclists, and public transportation users, notwithstanding the provisions of RCW 47-2420 concerning responsibility beyond the curve of state rights of way. This last clause tells us that even if the local jurisdiction is responsible for the space beyond the curb, that we still have an obligation to work with them collaboratively, but include within our projects correcting the gaps and deficiencies in the active transportation network. And this applies to state transportation projects starting design on or after July 1st of 2022 that are 500,000 or more. The legislation speaks to the qualities of a complete street, directs us to identify those locations on state rights of way that do not have a complete and Americans with Disabilities Act accessible sidewalk or shared use path. And I've pulled a few images of places around Washington where that element is absent, and so not complete for that element, or complete for that element. We are also directed to identify those locations that do not have bicycle facilities in the form of a bike lane or adjacent parallel trail or shared use path. An example of not complete and complete. And that it isn't enough to have those facilities present where they are present in a higher speed environment, that it is not complete even if we have those facilities, if there is a posted speed in excess of 30 miles per hour and no buffer or physical separation from vehicular traffic for pedestrians and bicyclists. So this is an example of not complete where we have those facilities, but the speed limit is 40 miles per hour. An example of complete with that buffered shared use path provided. The last quality that the legislation speaks to is identifying those locations that have a design that hampers the abilities of motorists to see a crossing pedestrian with sufficient time to stop in posted speed limits and roadway configuration. Example of not complete and complete. The next element is funding. Money makes things real. As a legislative directive, the new requirement establishes that in context applicable to the complete streets requirement, completing the walking and bicycling network becomes a baseline requirement for those state transportation projects. This means that these needs will be addressed using existing project funds. Move Ahead Washington included a down payment on catching up on our preservation needs, but it did not provide a separate source of funding for complete streets. So as we work through our list of existing projects that are triggered by any number of needs, we will adjust the scopes and adjust the budgets so that when we are out there making a public investment of $500,000 or more, we will be fixing the gaps in the walking and bicycling networks. And as a program, As those adjustments to our scope and budget accumulate and we're implementing that new requirement, we will communicate our ongoing funding needs to our decision makers, which are the legislature, who provide our funding and our direction. Within all that, finding cost-effective solutions where we take the space that is already devoted to transportation and use it differently will be very helpful in stretching our dollars further. Being able to implement that complete streets requirement in a way that is sincere and practical is critical, as we do face a massive preservation backlog. Move Ahead Washington provided a down payment towards addressing that gap. The column that's labeled current plan annual average spending is the level of spending prior to Move Ahead Washington. And then the next column, proposed new revenue annual average spending, represents the additional funds provided through that down payment. As you can see in the final column, there is still a substantial gap. What we do have is a new approach that will deliver more value from our public investments. It enables us to, as deliverers, reap the benefits of the efficiencies of one design and construction cycle to address multiple deficiencies, and for the people who are using our transportation system to also reap those benefits of one construction cycle. And through this, we are continuing to steward our mature highway system while adding to our significantly underdeveloped active transportation system. And we are building infrastructure that aligns with our state and community goals. The next element is the team. Money makes things real and people make things real. I'm leading the statewide implementation of the new requirement. This change is far-reaching with many implications for how we do business and many staff members and stakeholders that it affects. We quickly stood up a number of statewide teams, each with a clear lead, to provide a single point of accountability and facilitate communication, supported by a group of staff who are motivated to contribute and networked together with team leads across topics, regularly connecting to keep the efforts coordinated. In parallel with development of statewide guidance, we also established teams within each WSDOT region who are responsible for key aspects of the new process that we're setting up to implement the new requirement. These teams brought together our existing staff across multiple disciplines who had the greatest expertise in active transportation and complete streets and were highly motivated to contribute to a successful implementation. Across the agency, the response has been tremendous, a phenomenal team effort. While rapidly mobilizing, we established a culture of collaboration based on these principles. Better twice than not at all. What's obvious to one person isn't necessarily obvious to others. So make sure that you are sharing the piece that you know. Refine rather than create new. We're adding to many years of incremental changes towards this direction. And the more we can adjust rather than create from whole cloth new processes, the more quickly we can perform. It's easier to edit than to write. And so whether it was myself or other leaders, all often creating something that others could then react to, but getting getting things out there, getting things produced, and then refining. Assume positive intent. Challenge ideas, not people. Good enough for now, safe enough to try. This one in particular has become a touchstone that we come back to many times. Good enough for now, safe enough to try, keep us moving forward and to iterate forward. Also recognize everyone can't do everything. And so that's the beauty of a team. Different people focused on different aspects, able to accomplish a massive body of work. And with that, many hands make light work. And finally, don't spin your wheels. If you're struggling, reach out to me, reach out to other leaders, and that is a sign that maybe there's a resource that you're not connected with yet, or maybe you're uncovering something that needs attention to be improved upon in our process. We created a workflow map for how projects would go through the Complete Streets process. This is marked draft because we continue to refine this as we go from the theoretical to actual implementation, project by project. The Region Complete Streets teams are a critical aspect. They are responsible for the early steps that set the course for a project and then continue to have a supportive role throughout the process as projects move through design and construction. The Complete Streets requirement went into effect July 1st of this year. Over the span of just a couple months preceding that date, we established the policy and process guidance necessary to launch. This included publication of something we call a project delivery memo. This is an official policy document that complements and, where needed, supersedes our design manual, which is one of our basic guidance documents. So the focus in our work so far has been really in that first stage of implementation, which is screening of all projects over 500,000. And in that, we are narrowing down and identifying those projects that are in context with a higher potential for the types of short trips that are well suited to walking and bicycling. That is where we really have the greatest benefit from these investments. This includes projects that are in incorporated cities, as well as other population centers. If there's been an active transportation gap identified in a WSDOT local or a local plan, where treat all plans equal, whether it's ours or our local partners. And even if there isn't an existing plan, where our projects touch overburdened communities, we're taking additional steps to identify what the needs may be for Complete Streets elements, recognizing that overburdened communities will be particularly challenged to have taken the steps to do that prior planning work. Thus far, we have screened close to 300 projects covering approximately a 6-year span of work. And within those, Complete Streets applies to at least a portion of about 57% of projects. From our project delivery memo, for implementing Complete Streets, our goals are that they will be developed in cooperation with the affected community through active public engagement. We'll address the unique concerns related to Complete Streets of overburdened communities. We'll address active transportation network gaps that have been identified through a WSDOT or local plan and through public engagement. And we will eliminate bicycle and pedestrian network gaps within the project limits. And in that, we will provide bicycle and pedestrian facilities that offer a level of traffic stress of 2 or 1, and that includes as well providing separation from vehicular traffic when it's determined that a posted speed must be maintained greater than 30 miles per hour. I'd like to expand on level of traffic stress and how that relates to the different types, different characteristics or characterizations of potential bicycle riders. This builds on research that originated in Portland with Roger Geller and further expanded by Trek's own Jennifer Dill and Nathan McNeil and many others. This particular graphic is based on research in Denver. Illustrates the general categories of potential riders. Within that, their first category of highly confident riders varies depending on the study, somewhere between 1% and 7% of the total population. The next somewhat confident group is usually between 10 and 15% of the population. And this leaves somewhere between 50 and 60% of the population that is interested but concerned. The group that is typically not currently riding, but would potentially ride if there were facilities in which they felt safe and comfortable. The level of traffic stress is derived from a number of factors and results in a 4-tiered scale. The tiers don't relate directly or don't, it's not a one-for-one match with the 4 types of potential bicyclists. So level of traffic stress 2 is accessible to interested and concerned adults, and level of traffic stress 1 extends that to facilities in which most children would feel safe riding. With another illustration of examples of facility types that might meet those different level of traffic stress preferences. And this is this is a foundational element that we've laid out in our active transportation plan and are now putting into practice in our implementation of complete streets. Another foundational element is the safe system approach. And as we are looking at making changes to our roadways, implementing a safe system approach to reduce the chance of a crash occurring by separating users in space, separating users in time, and increasing attentiveness and awareness. And managing crash kinetic energy, managing speed, managing mass differential, and managing crash angles. Within our project delivery memo and all our supporting documentations, very explicit that as we are looking at implementing complete streets, that we need to include an option that limits the expansion of the roadway footprint and looks at potential modifications to the highway layout that can include narrowing of lanes or elimination of lanes, that this may reduce the highway's vehicle level of service, and that this is an important strategy in being practical in implementing those complete streets design features. So this creates an opportunity for us in many places to look at our existing facilities and imagine a different future for them. And particularly places that could be characterized as stroads. And if you are not already familiar with this term, I highly encourage you to look it up. There's some excellent videos on the topic, but a stroad is a facility that has been asked to do too much. It has been designed to move vehicles at high speeds, but it is an environment with a lot of complexity, access to properties, mix of users. And we know nationally that these are the types of locations where we tend to have more of those serious and fatal crashes. An opportunity to look at those facilities and to work with communities to see is the desired future state for that to be a street where we are focusing on more of calming traffic, reducing speeds, and embracing that complexity of space and users? Or is the preference to have that higher speed connection between places? And so the focus should be on greater separation and simplification. In all of this, the partnership with communities are absolutely crucial to the implementation of this requirement. It's essential that we work with communities and implement improvements that communities want. One of the things that we are already doing is building upon work that communities have done to establish plans of how they would like to see their state facilities change and become complete streets. And where those have not already been developed, we are proactively reaching out and encouraging communities to do that work so that when we come through with a state transportation project, there's already a plan for how that transportation project can implement complete streets. We also recognize that our facilities can be challenging environments for active transportation. And really the larger goal is contributing to complete networks of active transportation. And in some cases that there may be an existing facility on a parallel route that provides the target level of traffic stress and good route directness, and that may meet the need. This will not always mean changes on state facilities, but we'll be working with communities looking within that larger context. And again, that creativity, looking at how we can implement things differently within existing space, are our best opportunities. Share just a quick example here of this precedes our complete streets requirement, but is a nice illustration of what is possible. This is the small town of Duval, Washington, with Washington Highway 203 that runs through the downtown. This is what it used to look like. They had consistent problems with speeding through their downtown. You can see their attempt to draw attention to this crosswalk. And they redesigned this space. They were able to maintain all of the features that had existed previously, the vehicle lanes, the parking, and add in bicycle lanes, a center median, and that change in environment is much more effective at calming traffic and making that crossing environment welcoming and effective. So the next element I want to share is some of the wealth of resources that is available out in, it's an exciting time to be doing this work. And This is not an exhaustive list of all appropriate guidance documents. It's not an endorsement by WSDOT. And as we are trying to very effectively, efficiently, on compressed timelines, deliver this new requirement, these are some of the resources out there that we are looking to help us. A number of resources: pedestrian facility design, AASHTO's pedestrian design guide, FHWA's accessible shared streets guide, Portland's pedestrian design guide, and Seattle Streets Illustrated. For bicycle facility design, there's the existing 2012 AASHTO bike guide, and hopefully soon, maybe 2023, AASHTO will be publishing a new bike guide. Of NACTO's bikeway design guide, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation's separated bike lane guide, ITE's protected bikeways guide, and FHWA's bikeway selection guide. Then looking at adding in transit and the way different networks connect in with each other, FHWA's Achieving Multimodal Networks and NACTO's Transit Streets Guide. And lastly, the ODOT, not Oregon, but in this case, Ohio Department of Transportation Multimodal Design Guide. This guide is brand new as of April, and it's very comprehensive, compiles and builds on a range of best practice material from a variety of sources. I also want to mention another resource that we are excited to be able to soon put into practice. NCHRP has developed a guidebook for roadway cross-section reallocation, and I am on the panel for this project, so been able to see its development over the years, and I'm very excited that it should be published soon to the project page, and it provides both a guidebook and also an Excel tool to help communities look at the trade-offs and how the space currently devoted to transportation can be used in different ways to provide safe facilities for all users. We will be looking to and utilizing the wide variety of traffic calming tools, opportunities to look at that existing cross-section and narrow vehicle lanes and use that to add in additional elements, or road diets, also known as road buffets, reducing the number of lanes and adding to the diversity of transportation methods that are supported. So, in conclusion, Complete Streets is an approach to planning, designing, building, operating, and maintaining streets that enables safe access along and across the street for all people, including pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, and transit riders of all ages and abilities. This is illustrated here by photos from locations across Washington. Complete Streets is something that we have been doing in Washington for some time, and communities across country and across the world have been doing. And we are very excited in the Washington State Department of Transportation to be taking this approach at scale to our public investments in state transportation projects. Implementing complete streets on state transportation projects is one of many actions that WSDOT is taking to contribute to transportation efficient communities. Transportation efficient communities are characterized by close proximity of destinations, complete low stress multimodal networks, and appropriate roadway characteristics for context and function. These three aspects work together like the legs of a three-legged stool. Which leg holds up a three-legged stool? They all do. They're essential. And we are contributing in the places where we have control and where we have influence to help make these shifts so these elements can work together in concert to create an environment in which all people can safely connect with their destinations and have the opportunity to thrive. A couple resources for more information. We have a Complete Streets webpage, and on that webpage is a link to our project delivery memo, as well as other resources. And there's my contact information, and always happy to connect with people. And while I have the stage, I'm also a quick share that our active transportation plan is a finalist for AASHTO's 2022 America's Transportation Award. So if that's something you'd like to support, I encourage you to vote for that. And we will, if we win, there's some great organizations that we will be supporting with that. So that is the end of my slideshow. I will stop sharing here. Let's see. There's stop share. And I look forward to answering questions.
Thank you, Celeste. For those of you viewing the webinar, please feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A feature in the control panel on the bottom of your Zoom window. And we'll go ahead and start with questions. The first is, I heard that the Washington Department of Transportation Complete Streets policy requires adjacent parallel bike facilities. How close must they be to be considered adjacent? Would it have to be in the same right-of-way, or could a bikeway a few blocks over suffice?
It's a good question. So one of the things I say is that things become clearer by the hour, because this is very fresh, and focus is on when we are there with a project, how can we implement that project differently so that we are achieving that complete street? So the priority is on facilities that are there as part of that roadway. There may be opportunities where, if it's more cost effective to provide a facility in a different location, we have not encountered that yet. So it's sort of too early to say. And this is one way that we are implementing active transportation improvements. This complete streets requirement, the trigger for it is that we have a project there, and that project is typically not itself triggered by active transportation means. So there are other programs and funding sources that we have that are active transportation as the leading need. We have a new Connecting Communities pilot program where we'll be addressing gaps in overburdened communities that have where state transportation facilities make it harder to walk and bicycle. We have that's a 5-year pilot currently. We do have Safe Routes to School and Pedestrian Bicycle Program grants. That's been a ongoing program that's tripled in size with Move Ahead Washington. So there, with Complete Streets, something else is the trigger. While we are there, we're going to be correcting those gaps in the active transportation network. But yeah, it does get complicated. And so that's why we've sort of set up a framework, and then that learning approach of, as we encounter projects, we're continuing to refine our guidance and our approach.
So we have another question from online regarding the $500,000 project cost threshold. How do you handle projects that are functionally together but are programmed as separate projects?
We are erring on the side of inclusion. That's the threshold that was established by the legislature. And there are some projects that fall below that, but transportation projects are expensive. So the vast majority of projects are triggered by that cost threshold, and we are, not creating in scenarios in which we're kind of doing things with how things are constructed so that we would avoid that cost threshold. So
our next question is from someone in the in-person audience.
Great.
Hey, Celeste, thank you for the presentation. Really inspiring to see such progressive work coming out of a state agency here. I know often state agencies, your funding is tied to VMT and then kind of intrinsically to LOS. And so I'm curious if there was any internal pushback to establishing a policy that requires you to consider alternatives that are very likely to diminish LOS, in lots of these projects.
Things are complex and multi-layered. One of the things that has been really just fantastic with this implementation is how ready our team has been. So, as we work through projects, I anticipate that there will be, some difficult trade-off conversations, but people within our agency really understand the benefits, and in that combination of elements, I think really contribute to why we are so ready to implement this. And having it as a legislative directive makes it very clear both that this is what's expected of us, and we can apply the funds that we received to the legislature to deliver this. And so, yeah, it's been really fantastic, the response internally, and even that kind of feeling of relief of, oh, now we have clarity that we can in fact implement the things that we understand to be important and needed.
Our next question is also from our in-person audience. We're just passing the mic down the row.
Yeah.
Thanks, Celeste. It's a great presentation and really encouraging to see high-level policy being implemented to support complete streets. Here in Oregon, one of the things that I believe we are confronted with is the freight community. And on several slides, you have photos of roundabouts, and you talk about reducing lane widths. How is the state of Washington going to navigate, or maybe you're working really well with the freight community to implement some of these designs that are safer for all road users. But here in Oregon, we still struggle with prioritizing roads for vulnerable road users.
One of the things that may not be intuitive for people is that when you provide that separate and safe space for people to walk and bicycle, that invites people to make those trips, some of the greatest beneficiaries are the people who are driving, whether they're driving for freight or another purpose, because any trip that's no longer a driving trip is a significant reduction in that demand for driving space. And so that's sort of, that's one theme. Another theme, the freight operators share an interest in not being involved in a crash. And so when the roadway is more predictable and safer for everyone, everyone benefits from that as well. Previously, I served on the City of Seattle's Pedestrian Advisory Board, and one of the things that we had was a joint bicycle board, advisory board, and freight board forum. And that was a great place to work through those complexities and kind of find the common ground. So there's, again, we are still early in implementation. We certainly work closely with the freight community as well. We have a new freight plan that's just come out. And we're looking at things like having differences between the accommodated vehicle and design vehicle and the control vehicle, and those solutions that can help in sending cues to passenger vehicles, so to drive more slowly, that can still accommodate the larger vehicles. I'm sure we'll have more to share as we implement more projects. I also wanted to add on the previous question, the funding for much of the investments in Move Ahead Washington comes from our Climate Commitment Act, and where we'll be selling carbon credits. And so that is a place where we are generating a new source of revenue to get beyond that, in some ways get beyond that dynamic of reducing VMT being a financial detriment. We also have our Washington Transportation Commission is looking at the possibility of road user charges. So yes, it's complicated on the financial aspect of it, but that's something that we're working on as well, so that those financial incentives can line up with our state goals.
Our next question is from online. So how would the Washington Department of Transportation handle a situation in which a roadway configuration that's needed to accommodate complete streets is not supported by said community that the roadway passes through?
Yeah. So we will have we have goals, and it's critical that what we implement is supported within local communities. And we also recognize that in some cases, improvements will be incremental over time. So we do have a built-in process for documenting decisions if we do less than implementing the full complete streets elements, meeting that goal of level of traffic stress of 2 or better. part of what we've set up is that doing that takes additional steps and design analysis documentation. Implementing complete streets with the full elements meeting those goals. That is the procedurally more simple process, but need to have that flexibility and to be able to be responsive to communities.
So another question from online. Does Washington Department of Transportation have different complete street standards for, say, urban centers, suburban areas, rural areas? And I'd also like to add on to that, where would that boundary be if it's only for urban areas?
Yeah, so our focus is in population centers, which are places with a higher density. We don't have a strict cutoff, but it's, you look at it and it's a place. There are people living there, destinations to reach, that potential for those trips that are of appropriate length for walking and bicycling. We don't have, at this point, we don't have different standards within that. I referenced a number of guidance documents that are out there from other DOTs and national organizations. So those are some of the standards that we will be looking towards. At some point, maybe we will develop different standards. Certainly recognize that different solutions are going to be more appropriate in different contexts. And the common denominator is human beings. And there's similarity in the types, the distances likely to be traveled, the vulnerability to impact. Human beings are human beings wherever human beings are. And so, that's sort of the overriding principle.
So I think we have time to squeeze maybe one more quick question in from online. One question is, there wasn't any mention about scooters or other micro mobility type modes. Is that also being addressed within the Complete Streets program?
Yes, in our active transportation, that set of modes more explicitly addressed, and it will be, the legislation speaks specifically to walking and bicycling, but we certainly want to be inclusive of those micromobility modes as well. It's not something that at this point that I've addressed in isolation as its own separate category. We get there, but certainly part of the larger active transportation category.
So I want to thank all of you for attending this special summer Friday well, it's not summer, it's fall, Friday transportation seminar. For those of you attending online, after the seminar ends, you will have the opportunity to complete a brief survey about today's event. It only takes a few minutes and we would really appreciate your feedback. We'd also really like to thank Celeste again. Celeste, thank you so much. And then all of you for joining us today. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.